Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you all for joining us today as we remember and celebrate the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. More than a half century ago, Dr. King brought the fight for equality and equity to Chicago. We continue to put those efforts into practice through our work here at AMITA Health, St. Francis Hospital. Dr. King himself told us, of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. To everyone with us today who has devoted their lives to improving the health of our community, thank you. Thank you for making a difference and honoring Dr. King every day. You are fulfilling our mission, being the healing ministry of Christ to all people regardless of ethnicity, race, religious affiliation, or economic condition. We have a great program for you today. In a moment, we'll show you a short video highlighting the history and impact of Dr. King. But first, I'd like to introduce you to Father Chris, who will lead us in a reflection. Following Father Chris, we will have a historical presentation and a musical selection by Yvonne Thomas-Smith, Chair of St. Francis Hospital's Community Leadership Board and Director of Health and Human Services with the City of Evanston. Welcome, Father Chris.
For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Matthew chapter 16, verse 25. In times of crisis, it is a natural response to turn inward and prioritize self-preservation. This base instinct is helpful in many situations. But in the theater of human history, this approach has most often led to Pyrrhic victories, where we win a few battles, but ultimately lose the war. Those leaders who help us chart a different path have secured for themselves a transcendent legacy. We may think of Lincoln, Churchill, Gandhi, Mandela, and of course, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Each of these leaders convinced others of two important things. First, that it is both noble and good to burn your candle in service for others. In order to attain the greatest good, we must be willing to give the greatest of ourselves. For no one dies in vain who dies giving life to others. The second lesson, particularly embodied in Dr. King, is that positive change is the product of creation, not destruction. In Dr. King's own words, darkness cannot banish darkness, only light can do that. Transformational leaders inspire us to call forth our better angels in the very moments when we are inclined to pursue our baser instincts. Dr. King cast a vision for us. Indeed, he shared a dream. He believed that we would find ourselves when we learned to love the light and stopped cursing the darkness. May his legacy remind us that there is no nobler calling than the building of peace and justice. We pray. O God, who bestowed upon Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. the gift of prophecy and a passion for justice, help us to follow his example by selflessly loving others without distinction and committing ourselves to being a voice for the voiceless and a friend to those in need. In your most holy name we pray. Amen.
that I know that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere. That I know that justice everywhere is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Thank you, Yvonne. What an outstanding select. Give her a round of applause. That's a tough act to follow. I would also like to thank Dino Robinson, founder of the Shorefront Legacy Center, which collects, preserves, and educates people about Black history on Chicago's suburban North Shore, for the tribute to late Honorable Mayor Morton. Dino produced a slideshow for the MLK celebration, and he's one of our past keynote speakers. Thank you. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. That quote from Dr. King is especially important today, as the past year has reminded us that the fight for equality and equity continues across our country. 2018 gave us both progress and loss. As we talk about history, change, progress, and leadership in times of crisis today, it is fitting that we also take a moment to remember Mayor Lorraine Morton. Not only was she the first woman, first African American, and longest serving mayor in Evanston's history, Mayor Morton was a mentor to the next generation of leaders that are leading positive change across the community today. She personified the best qualities of being a public servant, and her impact is still being felt today. She fought for inclusion, education, and strengthening the bonds of community. From her time as a student at Northwestern, as the first Black teacher at Nichols Middle School here in Evanston, principal of Haven Middle School, as alderman, as mayor, as a leader of the NAACP, she never lost focus on meeting the needs of everyone in our community. Her words ring so true today. Speaking in 2000 about the challenges faced by African American women, she stated, "We are no longer placed in the position of the granddaughter who, after the first day of school, was asked what she learned. To be quiet," she replied. "We are now recognized voices that will be heard. We hear you, Mama Morton." I would like to invite Mayor Morton's daughter, Elizabeth Brasher, up to say a few words.
Okay, you got me on that one, Kenneth. I wasn't expecting this, so please excuse me if I stumble a little bit. However, I have to thank St. Francis so much for the work that they do, for this program that you do every year. It is always amazing. St. Francis has been a favorite of Mom's and mine for more years than I care to count. St. Francis was special to Mom's heart over the years, and you know, she was a regular at these programs. I want to thank you so much for this amazing tribute, for extending your program. Your program is usually an hour long, and I used to always say, how do you pack such greatness into 1 hour? And so this year, by adding Mom, it's an hour and a half, but I love it. And I can't tell you how much it humbles me and how much this would mean to Mom. But I have to say one other thing, and that is that I think Mom would want me to say, and that is how much she appreciated all the love and caring and kindness that was shown to her by St. Francis while she was here. You know, the people always will say something nice to you when you've left this world, but I can truly say that St. Francis was a blessing to our family and to Mom while she was in this world, and she would definitely want you to know that. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. You got me.
just as a small tribute, as honorary chair of MLK Celebration Committee, we here at AMITA, President St. Francis, presence is still on the mind, huh? Forgive me. But we like to do this in honor of the late Mayor Morton, whom we loved as well.
Oh, I know.
The hope of a secure and livable works lies with disciplined nonconformists who are dedicated to justice, peace, and brotherhood. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. To the family of the late Honorable Mayor Lorraine Morton, in the honor and gratitude of her service in the spirit of MLK, AMITA Health, we thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, it's wonderful. And I have to say thank you to all my friends and family members for coming out today. My big brother too. I'm sorry my daughters couldn't be here, but to see
It's
this,
okay.
but and they regret it at this point because their schedules couldn't accommodate it. But thank you so much. This is wonderful. Thank you so much.
And now the tribute to the late Honorable Mayor Morton.
Did some people come to you and say, we want you to run for mayor?
I'm here at home, and in comes a group of people. Asked me to run for mayor. I said, oh no, I can't do that. Look in the dictionary for the definition of a politician, and I guarantee you won't want to be called a politician either.
And for a black person to be mayor of Evanston and live in the 5th Ward, I didn't think would ever happen.
She has the courage of her convictions.
Let's see how many of those things are important to the citizens of Evanston.
You know, I didn't allow anybody to call me a politician. I call myself, and I still call myself, a public servant. Only a life of service is a life worthwhile.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker this morning. Pamela Sutton Wallace, the Chief Executive Officer of the University of Virginia Medical Center in Charlottesville, Virginia. As a graduating graduate student at the University of Minnesota in 2002-2003, I had the opportunity to interview for post-administrative fellowships with many prestigious organizations. One of the main reasons why I picked Duke University Health System was our speaker today, Pam Sutton Wallace. Since we met in 2003, I am proud to have called Pam a boss, mentor, coach, and friend. As our selection committee reviewed potential speakers for this event, Pam's story and leadership is a story we can all learn from and relate to. Her bio is tremendous. She's leader of all inpatient and ambulatory services for the 600-bed academic medical center in Charlottesville, Virginia, recognized #1 by the U.S. News and World Report for facilities in Virginia. She's facilitated a variety of safety and growth initiatives and was featured by Modern Healthcare in 2018 as a top 25 minorities executives in healthcare, and also for her role in supporting her community in response to white supremacist rallies and supporting those that were injured. Pam is married to Maurice Wallace, who is Associate Professor of English at the Carter G. Woodson Institute for African American and African Studies at the University of Virginia. They have 2 daughters, Sage and Amaya, who are currently in college at Spelman College and Washington University. We are grateful for her leadership and are thrilled to welcome her to AMITA Health St. Francis Hospital today. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Pam Sutton Wallace.
Good afternoon, good morning, I guess technically still. I'm a little bit overcome with the emotion already of the morning. Thank you, Ms. Thomas Smith, for that incredible vocal tribute. And to Dino, who I just met, and who we have some kind of kindred spirit from of somewhere along this journey. But thank you for the tribute on Dr. Martin Luther King, and thank you for the tribute for Mrs. Morton, or Mayor Morton. I feel honored and truly privileged to stand here in her legacy, and in some way I feel her presence here today. So thank you to her family, her daughter and her friends who are here with us. Thank you to Father Chris, who gave those enlightening words. I saw you somewhere just a moment ago. I missed service yesterday, but his powerful words from Matthew keep me humbled and reminded of why we're here. I don't want to go too long with the perfunctories, but I must thank the Planning Committee. Can you stand up if you were part of the MLK Planning Committee? Let's give this group a round of applause. I take it not for granted how difficult planning can be in this day and age and trying to coordinate calendars and the like. Thank you to the Honorary Chair, Diane Latta. I appreciate your hospitality and your graciousness, and to Pamela Mitchell for her hospitality, and of course to my dear friend Kenneth. If you've ever mentored someone, it gets scary when you start hearing people say, I was their mentor, and I'm like, oh my God, he's running a hospital now too. And whenever I mentor people, I often tell them I mentor you with the expectation that one day you will be my boss. So Kenneth, get ready. One day, I fully expect that those people that I mentor will one day be my boss. So I'm grateful for that. And thank you to you and Hope for being dear friends for this many years. Again, I'm humbled to be here, and I give you greatest welcome from Charlottesville, Virginia, where we've actually received more snow than you have. We were a little nervous about my arrival here, missed a couple of flights, so I'm grateful to be here. But I had been up since 3 o'clock this morning. I'm a little bit disoriented, but the show will go on, and I'm grateful to be here to be able to share some lessons learned. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that most of you probably didn't even know where Charlottesville was located until about 2 years ago. And if you still don't know where it's located, it is in the Shenandoah Valley Mountains of central Virginia. And of course, and unfortunately, it made national, international news when we had white supremacists march into our community. And I'll share some of that story with you today and what it was like being a leader in the midst of that kind of chaos. And the lessons that I've learned and that I hope that we can impart on the next generation. But I also want to share some more personal things as I get towards the end of the talk. But let me first give you a context a little bit of what happened in Charlottesville and why it happened. First of all, not unlike many southern cities in the United States, monuments to Confederate leaders, I want to say stakeholders, I don't know if that's the right word, but Confederate leaders were erected throughout the South post-Civil War. And there's a lot of discrepancy about whether those monuments were resurrected for the purposes of remembering the Confederate South, or in fact they were used as intimidation tools for the newly released slaves and for those who they sought to continue to intimidate through power and control through things like statues. And this has taken on a wide national debate throughout the South. And in fact, many cities have taken down these statues and these monuments in commemoration of the Confederate Army in particular. But Charlottesville, unfortunately, found itself in a horrible position where as early as 2012, there was this question of why do these statues exist? And I can give a whole lecture on just the importance of monuments and what do monuments mean. But in fact, it's pretty clear that these monuments were in fact an intimidation tool for post-Jim Crow or pre-Jim Crow society and to keep people in their place, so to speak. And so we found ourselves in 2012 having a discussion after a book was released at the Festival of a Book, which is a big Charlottesville event, where people were starting to have serious conversations about why are there two significant monuments in downtown Charlottesville, one of General Lee, Robert E. Lee, and one of Thomas Stonewall Jackson, in prominent places and squares and communal spaces of the city. And in 2016, a young woman named Zaya Bryant, who was 15 years old at the time, she's getting ready, ironically, to graduate from high school and getting ready to go off to college, she filed a petition to the city council to have those statues removed. And that was in March of 2016. And here we find ourselves in a lightning rod events taking place. The council had elected to remove the monuments in a vote of 3-2, only to discover in May of 2016, the Daughters of the Confederacy invoked a group of people to come and protest the removal of those statues in May of 2016. And most people don't realize this long history that actually had taken place. And there was a small midnight vigil in front of these statues, very quiet. Most people don't even know it took place. Peaceful, but still a big statement that we wanted to keep these statues, that there was a community of people who felt very wedded to it. Then we find ourselves in 2017, July of 2017, with the first organized Ku Klux Klan rally of about 15 Klans members united around this statue that had now become a symbol. That once was a symbol of Confederacy, now becoming ingrained symbol of hatred. And in July of 2017, there was a riot, 50 Klansmen surrounded by hundreds of counter protesters. And more or less, it was uneventful. Literally, they came in, they were protected by the police, which created a lot of controversy in our community and really was a pivotal moment. But more or less, they were run out of town, right? And most of us thought after that July 2017 event that it was over. Those on the side of righteousness and on the side of dignity and diversity and inclusion felt like they had won that battle, only to discover at the urging of two, believe it or not, UVA graduates, Richard Spencer and Jason Kessler, who brought together what they called the alternate Unite the Right movement. And that gives you the context of what took place on August 2017, where there was a confluence of those white nationalists and white supremacists who descended on the small, what thought to be progressive town of Charlottesville. Charlottesville proper has at most 250,000 citizens if you count the surrounding area. So many people even question, how did Charlottesville, this little sleepy college town, Mr. Jefferson's Charlottesville, by the way, become the lightning rod? And I'll talk a bit more about it, but I want you to have the historical context of which my comments come from. So if we can go ahead and start the slide presentation. Now, those of us who work in healthcare know how to be prepared for emergency, right? Especially in this environment, in this day and age, where we can be asked to respond from anything ranging from an unexpected hurricane, tornado, to a snowstorm, although I bet you guys don't even call severe weather, do you? I've only worked in the Southeast, and we get an inch and everything is shut down, right? If you're from the Southeast, you know what I'm talking about. But in general, most hospitals, especially large academic medical centers, learn to do this exceptionally well. And UVA Medical Center was no exception. This is our preparation, some photos from our preparation prior to the events that took place in August. And you may ask, well, how did you know and to be so prepared? And we were fortunate in that, one, we knew the events of July that happened, and we were pretty well prepared for that event, and thankfully nothing transpired. But we had an amazing sources of information that told us, both classified and unclassified information, that what we were about to experience was something we had never experienced before. And that's rule number one, right, in times of leadership, is a level of preparedness and seeking information from multiple sources. And so we had to make some really hard decisions the month prior to this. So this is between July 2017 and August 2017. And these are pictures of some of our surgeons, our trauma surgeons, in fact, who were ready and available for any and everything that could take place. We made the very difficult decision, and again, those who are hospital administrators know, we made the tough decisions of rescheduling all of our elective surgeries that day. We were on point to have about 20 surgeries performed on that Saturday, Friday and Saturday, and we made the choice to not do those because we were worried that we would in fact need all of our ORs, or should a crisis loom. And then all of our residents, our attendings, surgical teams came in ready and available should they be needed. And I think we opened with the quote of service to our community, to have people come and stand in the ready to put their own lives at risk for the purposes of serving others, whether they needed it or didn't need it, was a huge moment for us as a team to celebrate together despite the looming circumstances. You can see that we prepared, this is the front of our hospital, and we prepared a full completely outlined triage plan where we would have low acuity walkie-talkie patients, we call them, who were able to walk to our facility or to be ambulatory, to stage them in the front of the hospital. In the lobby, we had patients who were not quite ambulatory, and of course we reserved the emergency department for our most severe patients. And then after the event, you could see the entire team. As encircled in the middle is the governor there at the time, Governor Terry McAuliffe, who came and recognized our team for the extraordinary service that we rendered by being available for the community. That day, we saw 28 patients, and this is August 12th, after the car rammed their way downtown Charlottesville, and I'll show you some slides from that. But we saw 28 patients, 20 of whom were associated with that car accident, and it's not reported widely, but 5 of those patients were pediatric patients. And I don't think we take the time to remember that innocent children could have easily have been killed. I would like to add that patients were in far worse conditions. It is an absolute miracle that we only lost 1 life, and we lost the life of Heather Heyer. And if we can just take a minute to acknowledge her loss. Thank you for doing that. We say her name on a regular basis so that we never forget that a young woman, 32 years old, lost her life to this tragedy, and 1 life was entirely too many in 2018. But nonetheless, our team stood ready and prepared, and by the grace of God, that more lives weren't lost. Usually, I show a clip here, a video clip, which can give you a much bigger sense of what it felt like to be on the grounds, and we call our campus grounds. Any UVA grads here? We call our campus grounds. To be on grounds on August 11th is palpable. You would have thought we were in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s by what was experienced. And I encourage you to go online. Katie Couric has a wonderful documentary called America In and Out. And there's recently been a documentary that's produced called just simply Charlottesville, that gives a lot more detail and just cogent images. Unfortunately, I don't have the rights to those, so I no longer am able to show the clip, but I can share with you some of the photos. What took place on August 11th, this takes place on the main lawn or the quad of University of Virginia. 300 young white men came into town, some from nearby, some from as far away as California, with tiki torches that they purchased along the way at a Walmart, chanting onto the lawn, "Jews will not replace us." And that seemed to have been the main refrain that was taking place at that time. They were dressed in Oxford's collared shirts and khaki pants, would look like any young gentleman who's attending college on any campus across America. We would have never been able to pick these gentlemen out. What was unknown to us was this event that took place on the Friday before the Saturday, the event that was very well planned and orchestrated. And so we were taken by surprise here. And so as a result, there was virtually no security or police presence, but yet we had students, and this is a statue of Thomas Jefferson. I'm sorry, you can't, just to point. This is the statue of Thomas Jefferson that sits at the base of the rotunda, national icon modeled or built by Thomas Jefferson. And around this statue are about 30 students, graduate and undergraduate students, that were actually preparing themselves for protests for the next day. And you can see they were immediately surrounded by these 300 protesters and literally attacked, violently attacked. And fortunately, none of them had to be hospitalized, but it was completely chaotic. People were running everywhere. People were unprotected. There was no security presence until just about the entire day was the evening was dismantled, and they left on their own volition. This again is some close-up photos of what, and this is the rotunda, again, an international icon on our campus. And here we have those protesters. Of course, it's the next day that most of us hear about in the news that took place on August 12th. And many protesters around the statue, the white supremacists around those statues in protest of keeping them standing. A tremendous police presence, but the challenge was the police presence actually didn't surround the statue. They were in other parts of downtown, and as a result, there were intense clashing between the counter-protesters and the white supremacists. There was violence. Many of them were dressed as militia. We are conceal and carry state. And so they openly brandish rifles and firearms. It was surreal, quite frankly, and I wish I could show you the video to give the power of it. But finally, before the real protests could even take place, the National Guard came in, things were dismantled, people started disassembling, and folks started going home. And again, there was a sense of the city had won because they actually didn't get to march. But as people were walking back home to their cars, the counter-protesters, a car came careening down one of the main thoroughfares in downtown Charlottesville in an area called the Mall. And without any sense of dismissal or fear, this driver, James Fields, careens down, and literally bodies just start flipping down the walkway. And so while us in healthcare, we can be well prepared for the eventualities of snowstorms and hurricanes and natural disasters, nothing prepares you for the experience like this unmitigated hatred that takes place. And so, of course, like any major emergency, most hospitals do a debriefing. Because of the magnitude of this, we had third parties debrief and help understand how did something like this take place. And unfortunately, the city, the state, as well as the university were under quite a bit of ridicule for the handling of the situation. However, the health system and interestingly, the Charlottesville Fire Department were actually heralded in all third-party reports as setting the example of how to effectively lead through a crisis like this. And one of those I just highlighted here, I'll read it for you, says, the Charlottesville Fire Department and UVA Health System had effective plans and promptly responded to the vehicle incident at the intersection of 4th and Water. Every person who was injured and needed hospitalization was removed from the scene and received treatment within 30 minutes, a remarkable feat given the circumstances. And so while there is nothing good about this, we are grateful, and I'm grateful to have had a team that could respond to this, and I'm grateful for the preparedness that took place and the extraordinary leadership by the team members who were running the command center and the like, and many of whom have been featured in national articles. But like any crisis, we did our own internal debriefing, and we sat in a room very similar to this one and had an open conversation about what could we do differently, how could we make ourselves better in terms of responses to emergencies. And interestingly, there were a few odds and ends in terms of, oh, well, we could have staged this room differently, or we could have had the patient family visitor section a little different. Interestingly, one of the problems we realized, we locked down so tightly that our own staff couldn't get in. That's a problem, right? When the physicians and all couldn't get in. But in general, we felt like we had performed pretty well. What was a far more interesting and compelling conversation that took place was the open dialogue that occurred around diversity and inclusion, or the lack thereof in our institution. And by the way, Charlottesville is roughly 80% white, 13% African American, and 7% Asian. And so it is not a very diverse community. But interestingly, those who were in the debriefing, who were people of color in particular, quickly said, some of the feedback that people were saying was, we couldn't believe these invaders came into our community and took over. And this is not Charlottesville. And that was a refrain that was frequently heard throughout the city. This is not our Charlottesville. We're more progressive than this. This is not us. These people came from the outside and they penetrated us. But in fact, our staff said, wait a minute, not so true. This happens to us every day. And the stares around the room, including my own, quite frankly, of the sense of pain that that our staff was experiencing on a regular basis was absolutely foreign to most of us in the room. And not that any of us were naive about, the regular issues of racism. But I think the socio-political environment that we're now living in is giving a brazenness to the racism and discrimination that none of us have seen since the 60s, 50s and 60s. And so we had to take a pause and have an honest dialogue about what did that mean. And what we heard, some of the stories we heard were harrowing. We had staff being spit at by patients. Other team members not speaking up when they heard someone using the N-word or calling people out of their name. Nurses being rejected because of wearing a hijab. Men being persecuted because of what were perceived sexual orientation. It was a quick awakening that while we had dealt with some questions that came as a result of the Trump travel ban, which had happened a little bit earlier, people were saying, we need to think about what's going on and how we talk about diversity and inclusion. We had never heard this level of story, this narrative being spoken by a whole range of people in our workforce. And it wasn't just, who we think of typically, the environmental services staff, the food services staff. These were our doctors, our nurses, our front door team members telling us that this was rampant. And so as a leadership team, we said, we have to do something different. We've got to take this seriously. And so in February of 2018, we decided to host, we have an annual leadership summit, and we decided to use the 2018 leadership summit to talk about diversity and inclusion and what it really meant to us as an organization and how this event had absolutely changed all of our lives in a very different way. The summit, just for your information, includes managers from every entity within the health system. So it's everyone who holds the manager title up through my role. It included people from the medical center, our medical school, our school of nursing, as well as our faculty practice, our physicians, our chairs. And it was about 500 people gathered in the John Paul Jones Arena, which is where our basketball team plays. So this is a big gathering of folks. And so I wanted to share with you a clip from that day. Scott, can you help me get that started? Coming up. So just to, as we're getting this rolling, there were some key objectives. I'll tell you after. Well, maybe.
Today we'll be discussing diversity and inclusion, really looking to build a foundation around how to build a culture of humility.
On my 4th day working, I was on call and I got a page. The ED was admitting a patient and they wanted me to come evaluate him. A guy in his 70s with altered mental status. Through the conversation, it was flowing, easy. I kind of created the space to just hear how he was thinking, how he was talking. But that struck him. He said, "Do I know you from somewhere?" I said, "No." He kind of turned away from me. And then finally he said, "Ah, I got it. You're that N-word who used to hang out in Jimmy's backyard." So how to address these twin challenges, the challenges of supporting a diverse staff and at the same time redressing these historical insults? Well, there's a few things. I think we name things. We name equity and justice as health system priorities. We say that we own this. This is important to us. Just like creating a culture of safety is important, or a culture of quality is important, a culture of justice, equity, and reconciliation is important.
And then there's the trans man I know who was in the ER for a kidney infection. They were so busy, he was put in the hallway. When the doctor showed up to examine him, she just started to rip off his shirt. He tried to get her to stop, explained that he was trans and pre-op, and she didn't understand at all. She didn't listen, and he had to struggle with her to keep his shirt in place and retain his dignity.
Today, I think we gather to reframe a modern view of what liberty and equality mean? Through a new declaration as a declaration of interdependence. The power of interdependence lies, guess where? In us. Small groups who gather together to take responsibility for identifying the racial structural problems in our midst and working toward those solutions. Commitment to such a mission trumps talent and skill and personality.
So these presentations were a great sample of how we tried to take the learnings from the events of August and really do some internal reflection on how were we going to be different. We, a group of 11,000 employees who effectively could really make changes in the Charlottesville community. And it was a powerful day. There was a range of emotions, right, as you would expect. Some people who said, this is long overdue, where have you been all this time, right? Some with the expectation of, you know, you guys are making a mountain out of a molehill. You make us uncomfortable. This is hard to talk about these issues. But has really energized a commitment by the vast majority of our workforce to create a climate where we will no longer idly stand by and watch other team members in particular be taken advantage of. And we made a positive commitment that that is unacceptable behavior. Again, the focus has been on our staff members who have received that discriminatory behavior because it was probably what was least expected in terms of outcome. Certainly, there's still some challenges team member to team member, but the vast majority of issues we were dealing with were our community members towards us. And so to be honest about those conversations and giving people the tools to say, we won't tolerate that here. We included things about developing scripts for our physicians, developing scripts for those who are leading teams so that they have language to use. So it's a work in progress. I often get asked, you know, where are we in that journey? Like any journey to improve diversity and to embrace true inclusion and to address equity in the workplace, it takes time. It takes continuing and constant leadership, and we're doing that. One of the beautiful reminders that there is always hope is the rainbow, the full rainbow that appeared on the very same day that we cared for the victims of that terrible incident. And our EVP, he wrote, he's a wonderful writer, he wrote, "Darkness fades against the beauty of our rainbow, signaling the triumph of diversity and inclusion over bigotry and hatred." And so it was, you know, a stake in the ground that University of Virginia Health System was no longer going to tolerate some of those behaviors. And those are important pieces. What I want to now share with you, though, is a little bit more personal and just how personal it is. And so most of you know I started at University of Virginia about 5 years ago. And this is what welcomed me outside of the front of my office door. These are my predecessors. Mind you, University of Virginia Hospital was established in 1901. I am the first African-American woman, the first woman to hold this position. Now, arguably, the roles have changed back and forth. I often get asked, what has my experience been like as an African-American woman leading an academic medical center? And in fact, I think I'm the only African-American woman leading an academic medical center in the country. But what I often say, and what still is a challenge for me, is that I didn't come in wanting to be known as an African-American woman leading an organization. I wanted to come in as a respected leader in healthcare. I wanted to come in to demonstrate that I could deliver quality outcomes, deliver high service, incredible patient safety, and deliver the best care possible to our community. I wanted to demonstrate that I wanted to accomplish great things, and I believe in excellence. I'm allergic to mediocrity is my favorite line. My staff hate that, by the way. I believe in striving for perfection. We can't reach perfection, but I believe in the goal of striving towards it. So quite honestly, as a woman of color, and as many other people of color, I'm sure, as well as other marginalized people, we get tired of talking about race too, right? I get tired of defending, how did I get there? I get tired of explaining my credentials. Yes, I went to Yale. Yes, I went to Washington University. Yes, I went to Duke. But I shouldn't have to explain that to justify why I'm in the room. I'm getting tired of having to make a room for myself at the table. I never sit in the back row, even if I haven't been invited to the meeting. But yet, I do find it still, in 2019, important to represent all those things that I wish I didn't have to represent. Because people need to know what the right thing to do is. That's often called the minority tax, when people from underrepresented groups often have to teach, explain, justify, and it is just that, it's taxing. And I don't think we always are aware of the pressure that we often put on people of color, or people of diverse backgrounds, of people of different sexual orientation, different genders, what their expectations. We often leave them with the expectation of educating everyone in the room, which exacerbates an already difficult role that we find ourselves in. I was thrilled to see in the video of Dr. Martin Luther King that many standing by his side being injured were other people, not just Black people standing side by side, because it will truly take all of us coming into conversation to move us forward in this journey. It will not just be marginalized people moving us forward. It's all of us who rally with one another. Now, that being said, as I talk honestly about what my experience has been, without a doubt there's been microaggressions, right? Have people heard of that term, microaggressions? Kind of started in the early 2000s. And without a doubt, I experience them on a pretty regular basis. And to be quite honest, I don't give a lot of airtime to them because you just got to keep it moving any given day. But some that stand out more poignantly to me are the issues of exceptionalism. Without a doubt, people often come to me and say, but you're different, right? How many people have heard? How am I different? I may look like Miss Morton's family. That's what they look like they could be my family. But to be honest, I'm no different. I was given opportunity after opportunity by many other people who felt like they could sow into me. And I've been privileged to be at the advantage of things like affirmative action. I absolutely was an affirmative action baby. I'm proud of that. Without that, I would have never had the opportunities. But frankly, there's nothing inherently in me that is different. I get the micro insult, it's often called, of you're so articulate. And while I thoroughly appreciate it as a compliment that I think it was intended to be, quite frankly, it's a microaggression. It somehow suggests that most of you aren't, whatever the most of you are, whether it's most of you women, most of you Blacks, most of you whatever. I often get, I don't see color. I need you to see color. I want you to validate who I am. I would imagine you want to be validated for who you uniquely are. And part of that is our own cultural influence and our cultural background. And so as I've been on this journey, there's lots of intersectionalities around race, class, and gender that I could go on. But suffice it to say that you have to walk into these leadership roles with a sense of self-awareness of who you are and confidence that supersedes those microaggressions that often come. Now, unfortunately, I have to share that on December 28, 2018, which was 3 weeks ago, my family and I, we were traveling back from a much-needed vacation in Jamaica. Yes, it was glorious and a nice, lovely rest, and we enjoyed ourselves tremendously. We got home about midnight at the notoriously slow Charlottesville airport, where you wait for your luggage forever. And I know I'm running out of time, but I think it's really important to share this story. And when we were waiting, our luggage finally came down, and my husband quickly pulls off, or actually I pulled it off, I have to take the blame. I quickly pulled off our luggage. I start taking it to the car. I'm loading up our beautiful, middle class, quintessential Black SUV outside a really tiny 5-gate airport where you can actually still pull up to the side. And we're loading our car up. All of a sudden, my husband comes out, he's starting to put his golf clubs in. I'm like, I can't maneuver all that. You figure it out. I don't want to damage the clubs. And two gentlemen come to the side of the car, and I'm sitting inside the car, and I see one gentleman pull a suitcase out of our cargo space. And Maurice yells to me, "You picked up the wrong bag." I was like, "Oh no, so sorry." So I get out of the car and I wrap around. Maurice runs back into the building to reclaim our actual luggage. And I'm standing there with two gentlemen who, an older gentleman who, is calm and he's taking the luggage. But then a younger gentleman proceeds to cuss me out in every vulgar word you can imagine. And I tweeted about it here. Not real in my anger and angst. You can see it's, when I posted it was like 11:48. It's changing. I don't know how it got to 8:30, but it was 11:48 when I posted it. And he's yelling at me, just using all kind of vulgarities, and my daughters are there watching. And I'm just a little bit overwhelmed. I'm like, "Sir, I just, honest accident. It's a Samsonite black luggage, come on." And I'm so sorry. He proceeds to start walking away. My husband's getting the real luggage. And halfway down to his car, he proceeds to call me an effing N-word. And in that moment, I just was taken aback. Because all this work we've been doing, and I really in my heart believed that I wasn't naive enough, but yet idealistically enough to think, we still do this? And in that moment, with my daughter standing next to me, I don't know what to do. I look around and I'm like, do I chase him? That's my instinct, right? To go chase him and tackle. That's the instinct. Then I'm thinking, do I cuss him out back and realize my daughters are watching? I'm to set an example, and I really believe in the power of showing grace. And then my daughter's looking at me painfully. I just was numb. And finally, the only word that comes out, and all I can think to say is, "That's real mature." How'd that go for me? And I proceeded to keep saying, "I'm sorry." Meanwhile, other people are observing this. And so I tell the story because in that moment, I never felt so powerless, so humiliated, and so disrespected. And yet it dawned on me, that's exactly what white supremacy and sexism and patriarchy and all the other isms we want to quote has us to do. It wants us to feel powerless, humiliated, embarrassed. Now, I'm still struggling with this because I've worked really hard to raise independent, strong black women. And in their face that day, I saw embarrassment, shame, and disappointment. And fortunately, I've had conversations with each of my daughters, and they assure me that, "Mom, you didn't embarrass us, and you weren't shameful. You took the high road." But now I understand just what Dr. Martin Luther King meant when he said, a quote he said in 1956, and let me read it. It's similar to some we've already shared. "As you press on for justice, be sure to move with dignity and discipline, using only the weapon of love. Let no man pull you so low as to hate him. Always avoid violence. If you succumb to the temptation of using violence in your struggle, unborn generations will be the recipients of a long and desolate night of bitterness, and your chief legacy to the future will be an endless reign of meaningless chaos." I'm grateful that my legacy will be more than a meaningless reign of endless chaos. I'm grateful that God endowed me with dignity and discipline in that moment so that my generation, your future generation, wouldn't see us descend into that kind of behavior. But let it be no mistake, discrimination remains alive and well. But what remains hopeful is that each one of us has an opportunity to prove otherwise. When you're faced with such a circumstance, I hope you stand in the face of the discrimination and come to the reckoning with a white supremacist or a racist or whatever you want to call that. I hope today gives you the encouragement that we can collectively and individually see our way through this. But that's the charge to us, not only when Dr. Martin Luther King was here to encourage us personally, but his legacy remains to encourage us now. I hope you take it in the spirit that it is meant. God bless you, and thank you so much for this opportunity to be here with you today.
President Pam Sutton Wallace, please stand up. I simply say, in the spirit of St. Francis, to the mission of AMITA Health, which is to extend the healing ministry of Jesus, and in honoring the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., on behalf of AMITA St. Francis, our administration, our medical staff, our associates, our patients that we're caring for right now, our community, you have just inspired us greatly. This is why we do what we do here at St. Francis with this wonderful program of honoring Martin Luther King Jr. We humbly and gratefully just say thank you. And yes, I would have walked him too.
Thank you for your service.
I wouldn't have walked him. Thank you. But before you go, as tradition, this is to Pamela Sutton Wallace for an insightful tribute Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration, January 14th, 2019, Leadership in Times of Crisis. We thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you so much for your service.
First of all, before I sing this last selection, I would like to thank the committee for asking me to share in ministry the gift of song. And I'd also just would like to say this has been a phenomenal time that we've spent. Thank you, Pamela, for your words. I am encouraged. And I'll just sing this last song and be out of your way.
What you are, there's an answer if you reach inside your soul, and the sorrow that you know will melt away, and then a hero comes along with the strength to carry on. You can survive when you feel like hope is gone.
Thank you, Vonda. One of the benefits of living in Chicago, you get to hear all your favorite songs, and Anita Baker ×2, and Boyz II Men, and Toni Braxton. That's my concert schedule, and then Mariah Carey is coming up soon, so make sure you get your tickets. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you all for your participation and attendance today. I want to acknowledge my wife, Hope, for her support. Thank you for coming. Before we depart, I hope you'll all join us in singing We Shall Overcome. I encourage you to grab the hand of the person next to you and join us together. We'll also have some refreshments. And for that, I'd like to have Michael Doyle, our Regional Director of Mission at AMITA Health, come up to the podium to bless our food. Thank you all for a beautiful morning.
Thank you. We all carry so many heroes in our hearts today. We carry Heather Heyer, and we carry the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who only lived to be 39. Somebody I carry in my heart literally and in my car is a 99-year-old friend of St. Francis in this old prayer car. So she smiles upon me, she blesses me, and this is the prayer we'll have today, as we do ask an abundant portion of God's blessing on our food, our fellowship, our feasting. Thank you for coming. I do want to say a wonderful shout out and thank you to Kenneth and to Hope for living in Evanston, for loving Evanston, for raising your boys here. I think last year they were here. And we keep you all in our prayers and give thanks for your leadership, your witness, and Pam, all of you. Let us pray. Lovingly in the hands of the Father, I place myself today. Nothing can harm or hurt me, for love shall guide my way. Peacefully in the hands of the Father, I leave my cares and woes, and peace serene abiding, my troubled spirit knows. Joyfully in the hands of the Father, I walk, though dark the way, for joy shall banish sadness as night is sped by day. Trustfully in the hands of the Father, I seek to know his will. I trust the master workman and workwoman my every need to fill. Prayfully in the hands of the Father, I leave my all today. I do not fret and worry, I only wait and pray. Amen. Amen. Let us rise and sing and hold one another's hands.
live in peace.